So when looking at a used track hoe, another component that's usually undervalued and missed a lot is the undercarriage. It's actually one of the single most expensive components to replace when you have to. These can range anywhere from $12,000 upwards of $70,000 depending on the size of the machine that they're on. So when looking at them, there's several components that make up an undercarriage. You have your idlers, you have your carrier rollers, your sprocket segments are in the back, and you have your bottom rollers. So to start, what I always like to do, and Volvo actually has the tooling so you can measure these and actually get an actual conversion number. So what you measure off of, you're looking for is the tread on the idler. You're looking, one, to make sure that it's flat. Usually when these get a lot of wear, you'll start feeling a lip on the end. The other thing you can look at is, so this idler is attached to a track adjuster, and so the track adjuster is adjusted out with grease, and you can feel the end of this box here. If there's a lot of internal wear on the links itself, the bushings, this will actually be out and you can actually touch it. So we're looking for that, the tread wear. It's not really it's more cost prohibitive now than it used to be, but not uncommon for idlers. They would have retread them, which is they pull the roller out and they weld them. So you want to look for that. Generally speaking, when they do that, they haven't changed the bearings inside. You also want to look to see if these things are tracking straight. You need someone with you because sometimes they'll get a wobble to them when the bearings are out. So it's definitely something to be mindful of. And then we get into this area. This is the link together. Some call them the track chain. Some call it the links, link assemblies, several different names. But in essence, with the link, you have the link itself, which is a two-piece link, and then you have a pin and a bushing. So in excavators, traditionally, they're always grease sealed. You can see some in applications where there's a lot of walking where they'll have a salt rail, which is they're sealed and lubricated with oil. If you run across one of those, you want to make sure that the plugs are in them. If the plug's missing, chances are the oil's out. But like I said, most common you'll see are grease sealed undercarriages. So what you're looking for here is on the bushing, we're looking for external wear and internal wear. So external wear, you can feel it. They're perfectly round, new. If you walk up and put your hands on it, you can start feeling where it's worn from the sprockets. So, like I said, it'll start kind of taking on more of a U shape. You'll start getting some flat spots in it. The other thing, if you can twist these bushings by hand, that bushing shot. And then to measure internal wear, which is the rail, it'll actually stretch over time. You'll actually measure across the pins. Depending on the manufacturer of the undercarriage, it can be anywhere from measuring across 5 pins, 4 pins, or 3 pins. You put that in a conversion chart and it'll tell you the percentage of life remaining or used depending on which system they use. So you want to check that. Right here also, it's not uncommon for the edges to start getting worn with wear. So just look for that, and sometimes with cracking. The other thing is an indicator you can look at the pin itself is for bottom rollers for wear. So generally when the bottom rollers get really worn, you'll start getting spots right here. This will start getting worn into the pin boss of the link itself. That'll start getting worn out, and that's an indication that your bottom rollers are shot. The other thing to check for with pins is sometimes when the grease is out, they'll start walking out. And these pins, I've seen them where they've almost walked all the way out. It's not uncommon. What guys will go back and do is weld them in. So you want to check for that to see if they've been welded. Generally, they'll weld them just on the inside. You want to look at your carrier roller. Same thing, checking to make sure they're not leaking. You want to look for flat spots. If you get a flat spot on one of these, it's a general sign that the bearings are gone out in it. And so it's stopping, and that hence is the flat spot. Same thing with idler. You're checking to see if there's an edge right here. And then there's calipers, you'll slide over it and you can use that to measure the wear. And then looking at bottom rollers, if it's a long undercarriage, they'll have 9 rollers across the bottom. It's something to be mindful of if you're in an application that you need the long undercarriage. It's not uncommon in auctions especially where a guy might put the L on the side of the machine. So you need to know that. The other thing you're looking for, going back to your rails, so if you look right over here, so some will call that a frozen link, and that's where it's seized up. So the only way to fix that is to press the pin out, pressing a new pin and a new bushing. If it's one, it's not too bad. Generally, these won't ever free up. Once they seize up, that's the end of them. The other thing is looking at your sprockets. So the old adage is you can run new sprockets on old rails, but you can't run old sprockets on new rails. So if you have new rails, you need to make sure they change out the sprocket wheel. Most do that, but I have seen instances where someone was probably trying to save a couple, $500, so they wouldn't do that. So anyway, check if the sprockets are sharp. If you could shake a schick razor, then you know they're shot and they need to be replaced. The other thing to look for is your track shoes. It's not uncommon to see some of these where they get bent or they're broken. So you have a trailing edge in the front. Sometimes these will get bent. There's single bar, double bar, and triple bar grousers. So understanding the application you're working in makes a huge difference. Also trad width. If they're running them on rock, generally it's single or doubles. And you want a narrow pad because you want a real narrow surface if you're running across rock. Otherwise, these will start fatiguing and they'll break. And then when looking at the links too, the other is you can look up how many links come from the factory on a chain or make up the link assembly. It's not uncommon as these get a lot of internal wear. I've seen it where they'll actually go through and cut a link out and then they'll tighten them back up. When they cut that link out, it tightens the chain up. And an indication that that's been done a lot of times is this will look like a piano string. So you want to make sure you have and check with your OEM specs to make sure you have the proper amount of track sag, because if a chain's too tight, you're putting extra wear on all the consumables that make up the whole undercarriage. The other thing to check out too is I call this the roller frame. You're checking for heavy pitting. Once the metal, if they've been in a real corrosive environment, you'll tend to see a lot more links that freeze up, especially in coastal work. So you want to check for that, but this metal will start pitting and then it'll start flaking. You want to check that. The other thing to look for is if you can, take a grease gun and just put it in and try to tighten out the track. It'll give you an indication if the track adjuster is working or not. I've seen instances where those are broken, and the only other way to look is to look underneath, and I don't know how to do it without the track being removed, and you'll see where they've gone in, they've just welded up the track adjuster so it can't extend or come out anymore. And that's essentially it on an undercarriage.